I recognized something after I finished my recording that I had forgotten to include an example of price ceilings that have been used in the US. One example I forgot to include there, and so I'm going to make this separate video, and I'm not going to attach it to the price ceiling video. I'm going to include this separately. In the past, I tried to attach videos in QuickTime, and what I succeeded in doing by just following what I thought was a pretty simple procedure was to corrupt the file such that I couldn't save it. So I got to see my work and eventually have to give up because you can't save a corrupted file. You can't export a corrupted file. You can't do anything with a corrupted file. So I had to let go of my work and lose it all to start again. Since I will never do that again if I can possibly help it, I am not going to attach this video to the other video. It's going to have to be separate. So what I'm referring to is, again, a price ceiling, but a particular price ceiling that's been tried in the US, and that's rental housing or apartments. And so anybody, maybe you can think of the name of this particular price ceiling. If we're talking about a price ceiling on apartments, it has a name. I'm going to give people time to think about it. I know I'm not going to see your hands. It's called rent control. And with rent control, the idea would be that housing is a necessity. People need a place to live, and if the price is too high, that's unfair for a necessity. So the cities, the municipalities have sought to do something about that by setting a legal maximum that the price can be. And this is a picture of a binding price ceiling or a binding rent control using this example. And the outcome of that indeed has been what we see down here. The quantity demanded exceeds the quantity supplied. More people want it than it is being produced, the rate it's being produced at. So there are lines or queuing that exist for rent-controlled apartments, and people don't stand there and wait for it the way you might wait for something at a retail store. As I said all along, it depends on what it is, how these things manifest themselves. No, to get rent-controlled apartments, what's had to happen is people had to wait on a list to get those. And, it's very likely, I'm sure we could find articles, I'm sure it's happened that some people have found a way around waiting on that list, and some people have probably found ways to skip their places in line, which is, if that's occurred, would be an unethical behavior that we've talked about, or maybe even illegal. If money has changed hands, then it would be a black market that we've talked about. I think that's pretty easy to imagine happening here, and we explored that when we were talking about whatever it might be. But specifically with rent controls, an unintended consequence that did appear, and that's why rent controls have been largely stepped away from in these cities, is something unique, I think, to the housing situation, and that is qualitative decline. Qualitative decline. And this might be one that no one saw coming, really. Now it's been explored, so it's in your Econ 101 textbook, so in the future I don't think it'd be fair to call it an unintended consequence, but maybe when they did this, they didn't see it coming. It's just an interesting facet of human behavior, and that's why I wanted to make sure I didn't totally skip it. Let's think about what's going on here. You have people lined up, listed to get into apartments. And this is how many apartments are actually being supplied right here, right? So if you think about housing, when tenants are in an apartment, sometimes things go wrong, There's a drippy faucet. There's the roof is leaking and it's starting to drip down through the ceiling or something like that. Stuff goes wrong. Now, in this situation, what happens that's different from what might happen in a free market is that when the tenant who is in one of these apartments that is being supplied has an issue with the apartment and calls the landlord has a whole list of people who are waiting to get into that apartment. And so the temptation emerges for landlords to say, if it's something, minor that's a nuisance to the landlord, the temptation is very strong to say, hey, if you don't like it, I have a whole line of people who are willing to move in there at that price. right? Maybe in a free market situation, these things would be fixed more quickly, but they drag their feet when there's a whole line of people waiting for the apartment at the price controlled price. So qualitative decline is something that we have seen and that we might anticipate depending on what the good is in the face of a binding price ceiling. I bet that was interesting to a couple people who have taken the time to watch this. I bet it was.